It is quite remarkable to me that one of the biggest stories out there today is getting no coverage whatsoever, guys. It's getting zero coverage. It's a story that actually does affect our lives and our livelihoods. It affects our kids, and it isn't the abortion pill story and medication abortions that has people like Representative Ocasio-Cortez saying we shouldn't even listen to the Supreme Court and the FDA is superior to it. It isn't this conversation about Nashville and the expelling of a couple of members there for basically leading a riot, which they did, and all three members, in my view, should have been expelled. There is a story going on. It's happening right now, breaking right now, about this shooting that took place in Louisville. We're going to learn more about that story. But there was a Pentagon leak, and absolutely, positively, no one is talking about it. A leak that not only describes exactly what's going on with Ukraine and Russia, but a leak that might very well describe what's going on with the United States. Guys, I'm Tony Katz. Good to be with you. Welcome to the show, presented by Americans for Prosperity, AmericansForProsperity.org. Economic liberty, free speech. That's where it's at. This is Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army, joins us right now. You've been talking about this, trying to explain to people that this is a much bigger story than anybody has given it credit for, sir. Leaked Pentagon documents show how deep U.S. has compromised Russian intelligence. You would take from that there's some good news here, that the U.S. is doing its job on the intelligence side, but that these documents were leaked is the story. So first, what's going on with Russia and Ukraine? And secondly, why is no one talking about this leak?
Okay, first question, not sure. What's going on right now is there's been a leak of documents, two different troves, about 100 in total, but at least 50 that journalists have had access to over the past week or so. And Tony, these are as significant as 50 separate stories that could be told onto themselves. They talk about the United States eavesdropping on our allies. They talk about the fact that we don't think Ukraine is going to survive another year as a stalemate. They talk about positions on the ground of the Ukraine military, what's going on with their air defense platforms. They do demonstrate a significant amount of U.S. competence when it comes to reading the what's going on within Russia. But that's not good now, because that news is out. So those doors are all going to get closed down. So this is a leak of the proportion of WikiLeaks and Edward Snowden. However, this is going to have significant impact, I think, on the ground in Ukraine as this offense looks to try to get off the ground.
This tells us, sir, that both Russia and Ukraine have really gotten the crap kicked out of each other. These documents state that anybody who thought that the Russian military was going to take this in 3 days, it's clear we didn't have any intel whatsoever regarding how bad the Russian military was. But we didn't understand exactly how inept, how, let's call it corrupt, and how willing Vladimir Putin is to just throw body after body at this thing. What does it detail about the Russians that we kind of already know, but we really should understand?
Well, most of the casualties, the initial reports on the casualties were a lot higher. It looks like Russian disinformation sources then took them and tried to modify them to show that they were actually less. But if they came true from the initial reports, the Russian casualties are much higher than anyone had ever reported before. Same on the Ukraine side, though. Ukraine has suffered some tremendous casualties. But the air defense systems, I think, are the biggest story in this, in that the Ukraine is running out of those SA-300s. Those are not something that the United States can get their hands on very easily. We've got to send other air defense platforms. This is why that the Patriot missile and all these other air defense systems that the United States is trying to get there on time is going to be so important, because Russia still has more of that capability than the Ukraine can shoot down.
Talking to Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army. The other part of this story, this specific story, is that this shows us that the United States has serious issues. We are leaking everywhere. It wasn't just Snowden. It wasn't just Trump. We've got leaks, and these leaks are all over the place. we've got a serious issue. How come, or maybe I'm saying how come, maybe I've got it wrong. What has been the response to this from the Department of Defense? What has been the response from the Biden administration? Because I haven't heard one from the Biden administration. Mm-hmm. And what does this tell you? What does this tell military members about the safety and security of, well, our safety and security?
There's two channels right now that the investigation is going down. The DOJ channel is looking for the individuals because this is a crime. You can even send it as far as it's treasonous for the amount of information that has been released. So that's on the DOJ side. On the Pentagon side, there's a known of who's had access to these documents. These documents were part of the daily intelligence brief from the Secretary of Defense on down. They came from the joint staff. They came from the J staff. And on it, there's information that encompasses all of the intelligence collection agencies that the United States uses. So each one of them now has got a data breach. They are clearing their desks to make sure to figure out the mitigation and the risks and the plans for knowing that this information is out on the clear right now. So haven't heard anything from the Biden administration on it yet. And in the fact, again, so this was a document likely classified, got removed out of a SCIF, out of a secure location. Somebody took pictures of it, posted it online, and this is where we are right now. It's
that should be mind-boggling stuff. This is Sandy Berger in the socks kind of stuff. The idea that somebody actually took this stuff from a secure compartmentalized information facility, that's what SCIF stands for, and took it, was able to engage some level of copy of it, whether it be a photo or something else, and decided to post it. How is that not, I don't want to be the guy who assumes, how is that not major treasonous stuff?
Right. And the people that have access to that have the levels of clearance in order to have that. Those are officers. Those are high enlisted personnel that have, top secret and beyond security clearances that have access to it. And so the carelessness of it, it could mean somebody's been bought off by the Russians already. It could mean that people have infiltrated those committees. That is a real problem. And this is, again, what no one is talking about right now.
Talking to Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army. I read this story and I immediately texted you. Immediately, like, this is what we got to talk about. You cannot find this story, but what you can find a lot about is you have Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House, meeting with the president of Taiwan there at the Reagan Library in Simi Valley. You have the Chinese engaged in a multiplicity of operations meant to show big threat towards Taiwan, although they have not moved yet to try and take Taiwan back. But this seems to be where everything is heading and where it is going. Has there been any new movement that you've seen from China because of this meeting with Kevin McCarthy? And by the way, it's not like it was just Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House. She met with Hakeem Jeffries, who leads the Democrats in the House of Representatives, the day before, I believe it was, in New York. So meeting went on a bipartisan level with members of Congress. Was there anything new from China in their saber rattling that made you say, well, they're getting serious about Taiwan here?
Well, a couple of things. They're conducting some drills right now over the airspace in and around Taiwan. So those are being monitored closely. But this data breach is a tremendous distraction because the intelligence community now has got to focus on this as opposed to what's going on in Taiwan and in China. I think, and the Chinese, this is a gift to them. They'll use this as a way to show other democracies that America can't be trusted. Some of the information that was leaked came from other countries that told us not to release it out there. And sure enough, we did. So that story, that narrative will be told now by Chinese diplomats across the world. But you're seeing the kind of this, 1,000 things that are going to take place in a task list before war starts, and this is more things that are getting added to that task list that potentially increase that likelihood to come.
One of the people who clearly wants to lessen the task list is Senator Marco Rubio, who was very, very pointed in his commentary about Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, visiting China, a visit that people saw as wait, are we now utilizing China as the power broker here? China's going to somehow engage peace. What kind of fool would you have to be to buy into this? And the answer is, well, there are quite a few fools out there. Listen to Senator Rubio and how he sees the situation, specifically a question asked by, I would argue, asked by Macron, and follow his logic here.
As far as not getting involved in other conflicts that are not ours, we need to ask Europe, does he speak for them? Because we're pretty heavily involved in Ukraine right now. We're spending a lot of our taxpayer money on a European war. And I've supported that because I think it's in the national interest of the United States to be allies to our allies. But if our allies' position, if in fact Macron speaks for all of Europe, and their position now is they're not going to pick sides between the U.S. and China over Taiwan, maybe we shouldn't be picking sides either. Maybe we should basically say we're going to focus on Taiwan and the threats that China poses, and you guys handle Ukraine and Europe. So we need to find out, does Macron speak for Macron, or does Macron speak for Europe? And we need to get the answer to that pretty quickly, because China is very excited about what he said. They enthusiastically support everything he said, and apparently he said.
So that's just some of Rubio's commentary. Does Macron speak for Europe in this idea that, really what he's asking is if Europe thinks that some things aren't their business, can the United States think that some things aren't our business? You guys take care of Ukraine. We'll handle Taiwan. Ready, break. Like that's the question that he's asking. Did Macron set himself up for a problem here and Europe up for a problem here?
Well, he set himself up for the problem for sure, oversimplifying the issue with the Chinese. And he speaks for himself, because I don't believe the rest of NATO, some of those NATO countries, you talk to any of those NATO countries, Sweden and Finland, for example, that are just in NATO, those bordering countries around Ukraine, they look at France like, what's going on? You're half in the game. Same with Germany. That, this is kind of the remnants of old Europe power struggles that if the United States is not involved, we would want another country in Europe to step up that has the same capability. But France picks and chooses which way the wind blows and then because of that, that we don't get the stability and the leadership from those countries that we need. It's old school European thinking that Macron has got there when he talks about following America. We step up to the game there and kind of get in it, especially when it comes to Ukraine.
But China is not involved in this old school thinking. Far from it. China is very, very involved in the new school thinking. So they see a move like this, a maneuver like this. Do they recognize, wait a second, this is a fracture point. This is good for us. But then again, it's not good for them if the United States is still focused on Taiwan. It's only good for them if they can engage the pressure to not have the U.S. focus on Taiwan, or be able to focus on the idea of creating better trade partners with Europe, being able to have more power over Europe. So as China sees this, what do you think their move is?
Yeah, I think China is going to be pragmatic about it and recognize that they're going to use it as a propaganda victory initially. But if they're realistic about what's happening, the realpolitik on the ground in Europe is that those countries are still well beyond Ukraine's and supporting Ukraine, as well as the United States is in the game there. I mean, Marco Rubio does pose serious questions to Macron. I think he comes back to this side and we can ask him those questions. But a lot of it just has to do with he was there. He gets feels good about what he thinks is going on there, and then kind of spouts off like that. He's clearly speaking for himself in France. I don't believe that the rest of Europe is in the same direction as he's on.
This leak, these documents being leaked from the Pentagon, and as you describe it, I mean it's insane. Is this ever going to reach someone's desk where people get fired, where people get arrested, where people are charged with treason? Or is this going to be just another one of those things that kind of gets brushed under the rug? I mean, this is the same military that said, we took a look at what happened in the Afghanistan withdrawal, and we're super proud of so much of it, as John Kirby said, but really any of the issues are all Donald Trump's fault. That doesn't seem like a military that takes responsibility for its actions. Anybody going to be held responsible for these leaks?
Well, I can tell you that the military took what happened in Afghanistan very seriously. I think that was more the administration doing a news dump on a Friday, Thursday, long weekend, because if they really wanted to blame Donald Trump, they wouldn't have done it then. They would have done it, in another time frame, I think. But we'll to find out. I look at this and say, who would have released these documents? A disgruntled employee, somebody, because they impacted our relationship with Israel, South Korea. That the discussions about us putting pressure on the South Koreans to ship artillery rounds to Ukraine. So we have to just see it could be a reality winter situation where or Chelsea Manning, something where they thought that they were doing the right thing, releasing this out. The bottom line is it's out now. Stake is in the ground. And we move, forward from here on some level. So, we can't get any worse as this information comes out. And if anything, there's a clear trail as to who had access to these documents. That's a known. And I'm sure the DOJ plus the Pentagon will work to find out who at least had access to them, and they'll be all part of the investigation.
Major Mike Lyons, retired United States Army. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and can't thank you guys enough for being a part of what we do here. And be sure to subscribe on Rumble. My thanks to Americans for Prosperity, AmericansForProsperity.org. Seriously, no matter where you are, subscribe on Rumble, because Rumble is doing the good work, and that's where we have the shows. And there's no reason we don't have 90 bajillion subscribers. That's also as a Pentagon term. Bajillion right there. Guys, appreciate you. I'll catch you next time. Take care.